The moment a woman looks you dead in the eye and casually mentions how hard her friend's husband works, how driven her ex used to be, or how exciting that new coworker seems, understand something. This is not random conversation. This is not harmless admiration, and it is definitely not innocent small talk. It is a test, a silent evaluation, a psychological audit of your position in her world. And most men fail it without even realizing they were being examined. Because the second comparison enters the room, the relationship subtly shifts. Now you are no longer her chosen man. You are a candidate competing for your own spot. And while you are still sitting at the table, she has already opened a mental tab labeled Upgrade. This is how mental infidelity begins. Not with a kiss, not with a secret text, but with a comparison. A seed planted in your mind designed to make you question your worth while she quietly measures your reaction. And here's the part that should unsettle you. She is not just observing your response, she is studying it. Does he get defensive? Does he over-explain? Does he promise to do better? Does he shrink? Because the moment you start justifying yourself, working harder to prove something, or subtly competing with a man who isn't even in the room, you confirm the frame she is testing. You step into the role of the man trying to qualify for her approval. That is the psychological pivot. That is where power changes hands. Most men think the danger begins when she starts hiding her phone or coming home late, but the real danger begins much earlier, at the dinner table, in casual conversation, in those harmless remarks that feel slightly off but not serious enough to confront. Comparison is not admiration, it is leverage. It shifts the emotional burden onto you while she begins detaching internally, preparing options, rehearsing alternatives. And if you don't understand the mechanics behind this verbal maneuver, you will misread the entire situation. You will think the solution is effort when the real issue is positioning. You will think you need to impress her again, when in reality, she is testing whether you still see yourself as the prize. In this deep analysis, we're going to dissect why comparison is the loudest silent red flag of a collapsing frame, why it often precedes betrayal long before physical infidelity ever occurs, and why your reaction in those subtle moments determines everything, whether you reinforce your value or slowly talk yourself out of your own seat. Because the man she accidentally mentioned during dinner, he is not the threat. The threat is the psychological shift happening right in front of you while you smile and nod. By the end of this breakdown, you will understand the science behind why she does it, what it signals about attraction dynamics, and how a single misstep in your response can turn you from the man she respects into the man she replaces. Stay with me, because once you see this pattern clearly, you will never hear those comparisons the same way again, and that awareness alone can be the difference between remaining the leader in your own story or becoming a footnote in hers. I'm not here to impress the crowd. I'm here for the man quietly rebuilding his life brick by brick, the man who got hurt but didn't stay broken, the man who learned the hard lesson and chose growth anyway. If that's you, don't stay in the background. Subscribe. Stand with men who are choosing strength the right way. Leave a comment and let your presence be known. No hype, no chaos, just discipline, direction, brotherhood. The first psychological reality we must confront is the devaluation phase. Behavioral observations suggest that before a woman ever physically betrays a man, she must first kill the image of him in her mind. She cannot stay loyal to a man she respects, so she uses comparison to chip away at that respect. When she says, "Why can't you be more like him?" she is essentially creating a vulnerability map. She is telling herself that you are lacking, which justifies her looking elsewhere. Psychological patterns show that this is a defense mechanism used to avoid the guilt of future infidelity. If she can convince herself that you aren't enough, then her cheating becomes a search for what she deserves rather than a betrayal of her vows. You are the victim of cognitive reframing when she turns your hard work into insignificance by comparing it to the perceived success of a stranger. We also have to look at the hypergamous comparison trap. Behavioral patterns show that a woman's attraction is often relative, not absolute. This means she doesn't just look at who you are, she looks at who you are compared to the other options in her social circle. In the age of social media, this comparison is constant. She is seeing the highlight reels of other men and comparing them to your real life. Psychological observations suggest that when she voices these comparisons, she is testing your frame. She wants to see if you will crumble and try to compete for her approval, or if you will hold your ground as the prize. If you start defending your worth, you have already lost the battle. You are the victim of status anxiety when you allow her to dictate your value based on the performance of men who don't even know you exist. Let's look at the path of Arthur. Arthur was a man who provided everything for his wife Sarah. He worked 60 hours a week to ensure they had a beautiful home and a comfortable life. But one day, Sarah started talking about her new manager, a man who really understood work-life balance and always took his wife on surprise trips. Sarah began to pepper their conversations with these comparisons. "Why don't we do that, Arthur? How come you're always so tired while he seems so energetic?" Arthur, being a good man, thought the solution was to listen and adopt. He started working even harder to buy her more gifts and tried to match the energy of a man he had never met. Arthur is the loser in our story because he fell for the moving goalpost fallacy. By trying to outperform the man Sarah was comparing him to, he surrendered his sovereignty. He showed Sarah that her disrespect was a remote control for his behavior. Psychological patterns suggest that the more Arthur tried, the less Sarah respected him. She saw his effort as desperation. Eventually, the comparisons turned into contempt, and Sarah began a physical affair with the very manager she had been using to shame Arthur. Arthur lost because he didn't realize that a woman who compares you is a woman who is already checked out. He spent his emotional capital trying to win a game where the rules were rigged against him. He was a victim of relational subsidizing, proving that you cannot buy the loyalty of someone who has already devalued your soul. The second reason this behavior is so dangerous is the erosion of the masculine lead. Behavioral observations suggest that a relationship functions best when there is a fixed point of authority. When she starts comparing you, she is trying to dethrone you. She is putting another man on the pedestal that you are supposed to occupy. Psychological patterns show that this creates a power vacuum. If you aren't the gold standard in her eyes, she will subconsciously start to submit to the standard of the man she is praising. This is why many men find that after a few months of comparisons, their intimacy drops off a cliff. She cannot desire a man she is comparing downward. You are the victim of sexual devaluation the moment she views you as a runner-up in your own home. Furthermore, we must address the social proof sabotage. Behavioral patterns show that women often use comparison as a way to socially shame their partner into compliance. She might do this in front of friends or family. "Oh, look at what Mike did for Jennifer. Isn't that sweet, Arthur?" This is a public audit of your value. Psychological observations suggest that this is a way to check your social standing. If you take it and smile, you are signaling to her and the group that you are a beta who can be managed through comparison. You are the victim of prestige stripping when you let her use the success of others as a whip to lash your dignity. The reality is that comparison is the smoke that precedes the fire of infidelity. Behavioral observations suggest that a woman who is invested in her man will protect his ego. She will highlight his strengths and cover his weaknesses. When she does the opposite, when she highlights your weaknesses by comparing them to others' strengths, she is inviting the enemy into the fortress. This is the psychological softening of the frame. You aren't being sensitive for noticing this. You are being alert. A man who ignores comparison is like a man who ignores a termite infestation in his foundation. Eventually, the whole house is going to collapse on top of him. You have to realize that your worth is non-negotiable. Behavioral observations suggest that the high-value man is the yardstick by which other men are measured. If she is using other men to measure you, then you have already allowed her to reverse the hierarchy. You are the chief executive of your life. If a partner is consulting with the competition and comparing your company to theirs, they aren't a partner anymore. They are a liability. True sovereignty is knowing that you are the standard, and if she can't see that, she is free to go and find the comparison she keeps talking about. I don't make content for the average mindset. I don't speak to the man who wants shortcuts, applause, or a soft place to land when life exposes his weaknesses. I speak to the man who holds himself accountable when nobody is watching, when there is no audience, no validation, no reward, just discipline and a mirror. The man who can say no to distractions not because someone set rules for him, but because he has standards for himself. The man who understands that self-control isn't restriction, it's power. If you're here looking for comfort, this won't resonate. If you're looking for someone to tell you it's not your fault and you don't need to grow, you'll feel uncomfortable. But if you're rebuilding your discipline brick by brick, if you're raising your standards quietly, if you're done being average in a world that rewards mediocrity, then you belong here. Most people watch videos, nod in agreement, feel temporarily motivated, and disappear back into their old habits by tomorrow morning. They consume, they scroll, they fade. But if you're different, prove it. Subscribe, leave a comment. Not for me, for you. Let it mark a decision point. Let it be the line where you stop being a spectator in your own transformation and start committing to it. Because growth doesn't respond to interest, it responds to action. And the men who change their lives are the ones who decide that passive agreement is no longer enough. Now understand this, because this is where most men get blindsided. The third psychological pillar of the comparison phase is what I call the projection of internal chaos. When a woman begins comparing you to other men, subtly or directly, it is often less about your deficiencies and more about her internal instability. Behavioral patterns suggest that comparison frequently emerges when she is experiencing an identity conflict within herself, when she doesn't fully understand what she wants, who she is becoming, or why her attraction has shifted. Instead of confronting that confusion internally, she externalizes it, she projects it. She looks at the green grass somewhere else, and suddenly your lawn becomes the problem. When she says Mark is so adventurous, she is rarely asking you to plan a hiking trip. She is signaling that the emotional spark she once felt has plateaued, and rather than examining her own fading enthusiasm, she reframes it as your lack. This is psychological displacement. By labeling you as insufficiently spontaneous, ambitious, exciting, or driven, she avoids confronting the harder truth that attraction requires continual choice, and she may have stopped consciously choosing you. Psychological dynamics show that when someone experiences internal stagnation, they often search for external stimulation to justify it. Instead of saying, "I feel restless and I don't know why," it becomes, "You're not exciting enough." Instead of admitting, "My feelings have shifted and I don't understand them," it becomes, "You've changed." This is projective displacement in motion. You begin working overtime to repair a problem that exists primarily inside her unresolved emotions. You sign up for self-improvement marathons, personality adjustments, performance upgrades, trying to fix a moving target, not realizing that the core issue is not your lack of adventure, but her lack of clarity. And here is the painful truth. You cannot outwork someone else's indecision. You cannot compete with a fantasy she has constructed in her mind. When a woman stops actively choosing you, she often creates narratives to rationalize that shift, and comparison becomes the tool. It transfers responsibility. It makes you feel like the one who dropped the standard, while she avoids examining why her own internal compass is spinning. If you don't recognize this pattern, you will exhaust yourself chasing approval that was never about performance in the first place. The disciplined man understands this distinction. He evaluates feedback, yes, but he does not automatically accept projected confusion as personal failure. He does not scramble to repaint the lawn every time someone else points to greener grass. He knows that attraction dynamics are complex, that internal stagnation is often internal, and that self-respect means refusing to carry responsibility for someone else's unprocessed chaos. This is why accountability matters. Not blind self-blame, but clear self-assessment. If there is growth to pursue, pursue it. If there is improvement to make it. But never confuse projection with truth. Never rebuild yourself in response to someone else's inability to decide what they want. The moment you understand this, you stop being the man reacting to every comparison, and you become the man who evaluates, chooses, and if necessary, walks away with composure. And that level of internal stability, that's rare, that's disciplined, that's not average.
We must also analyze the desensitization of the heart. Behavioral patterns show that verbal comparison is a microaggression that slowly kills emotional safety. Every time she compares your bank account, your body, or your personality to another man, she is desensitizing herself to your pain. Psychological observations suggest that this is how a woman prepares to cheat. If she can make you less than in her mind, then hurting you doesn't feel like a crime anymore. It feels like an upgrade. You are the victim of systemic dehumanization when your partner treats your life like a spreadsheet where she is looking for a better ROI, return on investment. A man who respects himself realizes that he is not a commodity to be traded. He is a leader to be followed. Let's look at the path of Ezekiel. Ezekiel was a man who understood the power of the non-reactive frame. When his partner, Clara, started mentioning a high-value guy from her gym who was so focused on his goals, Ezekiel didn't get angry. He didn't ask Clara why she was talking about him. He simply observed the pattern. He realized that Clara was testing the fence to see if Ezekiel would beg for her attention. Instead of leveling up for Clara, Ezekiel leveled up for Ezekiel. He maintained his standard and made it clear through his silence and distance that he did not compete for his position in her life. Ezekiel is the winner in our story because he utilized the law of absolute abundance. He didn't try to explain his worth. He simply said, if you feel that another man's path is more aligned with your desires, you are free to follow it. But in this house, I am the standard. I don't negotiate my value against the ghosts of other men. Because Ezekiel was willing to lose her to keep himself, Clara's psychological pattern shifted. She realized that by comparing him, she was actually losing access to a sovereign man. She stopped the comparisons because she saw that Ezekiel's frame was immovable. Ezekiel won because he realized that the only man who can be compared is the man who stays in the race. The man who exits the track and builds his own stadium becomes incomparable. He proved that authority isn't asserted, it is embodied. He was a master of boundary integrity, ensuring that his self-worth was never a shared asset. The fourth major reason why comparison leads to infidelity is the social media echo chamber. Behavioral observations suggest that women are now bombarded with comparison data every time they open their phones. Psychological patterns show that the digital mirage makes it easy for a woman to believe that every other man is doing more than you. If she hasn't disciplined her perspective, she will start to treat your stability as stagnation and his highlights as reality. You are the victim of algorithmic infidelity when she lets a screen dictate her satisfaction with the real man standing in front of her. Furthermore, we must address the restoration of the sovereign routine. Behavioral patterns show that when a man is being compared, he often breaks his rhythm to please the woman. He stops his hobbies, gym sessions, or work focus to prove he can be what she wants. Psychological observations suggest that this is the final nail in the coffin. The moment you change your routine because of her comparison, you have surrendered your lead. A sovereign man keeps his routine because it is his, not because it satisfies someone else.
You are the victim of frame collapse when your daily actions are a reaction to her discontent. The final realization is that comparison is a lack of character. Behavioral observations suggest that a high-value woman has the integrity to speak about needs without using other men as a weapon. If she uses Mark, Steve, or the guy from the internet to shame you, she is showing you that her character is fractured. Psychological patterns show that a woman who compares will always find a new comparison, no matter how much you improve. You are the architect of your life. If the tenant in your building is complaining about the view and talking about the building next door, you don't rebuild the view. You open the door and let them move. The reality is that the world will always try to measure you against the crowd, but your internal compass is the only measurement that matters. Behavioral observations suggest that infidelity starts in the heart the second a woman decides that you aren't enough compared to the world. If you accept that narrative, you accept the betrayal. But if you reject the comparison, you protect your spirit. You are the standard. You are the prize. If she can't see the mountain because she's too busy looking at the hills in the distance, let her walk. I have a smart question for the men who have the sovereign fortitude to finish this session on the danger of comparison. If you were leading a crew through a storm and one of your sailors started complaining that the captain of another ship had cleaner uniforms and better food, would you stop steering to polish your buttons, or would you keep your eyes on the horizon and drop that sailor at the next port before they mutiny? You are the captain. The comparison is the mutiny. The horizon is your mission. Stop polishing buttons for people who don't respect the journey. Drop a comment below and tell the Brotherhood, what was the one comparison she made that finally broke the spell for you? How did you take your power back when you realized you were competing against a lie? Share your exit strategies. Your strength might be the clarity a brother needs to stop competing and start commanding. Let's build the Council of Sovereign Men together. The fact that you're still here tells me something about you. You don't run from uncomfortable truths. You sit with them, you learn from them, and you apply them. That's rare. So understand this. You're not just watching content, you're building yourself in real time. And men who choose growth like that don't walk alone here. If this message sharpened you even a little, subscribe and stand with this community. Drop a comment and let me know what hit home. I pay attention. Keep tightening your standards. Keep doing the work. I'll see you in the next one.